Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, part 3 of our season preview series, answering the question, how big of an impact will Mike Budenholzer have on this team? We know it'll be big. How big can the new head coach in town really make his presence felt? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Suns. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Wednesday. Don't forget, Locked On Suns is free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button to become an everydayer and get locked on to the Phoenix Suns each and every day, along with thousands of Suns fans. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to buy any ticket. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Joining me, as always, the executive producer of The Drive on Fox Sports 910 from the unusual downtown Phoenix environment. He's in the studio, folks. How are we feeling on this Wednesday, Ben Garcia?
Listen, Brendon is the engine of this. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to jive off him. At times I drop the ball, but listen, if I'm not the straw that stirs this drink, I don't know what is. Brendon's got things he's got to do. I'll just be flexible. I'll just do the show from wherever. And it's okay. Just throw him under the bus and just show him how much of a team player I am and how at times we just have to do everything Brendon's way.
Yeah, my way. It's my way or the highway. That is really just the slogan of the show. Everybody has to listen to me. Hey, we may be doing some episodes from the arena. We've casually broached that possibility. So we'll have to see. Cool. We might be taking the show on the road a little bit, whether we like it or not this year. But let's talk Mike Budenholzer, Ben. The question today, 3 of 13 as we make our way through our season preview series. How big of an impact will Mike Budenholzer have on this team? How big of an impact can he have on this team? And answer it.
Sorry, jumped right over you. Because, no. I mean, you phrase it that way, like what kind of an impact that Mike Budenholzer would have. And, Suns fans, I mentioned this a couple episodes ago, were looking for the big domino to drop with the Suns in the offseason, whether it was 2 seasons ago in the middle of the year, it's Kevin Durant. And then a year later, it's Bradley Beal, and everyone's kind of looking for this next thing, but you're hamstrung because of the salary cap. You're being in the second apron that no one really knows all the rules of. And then people kind of glossed over the Suns' biggest move this year was undoubtedly getting Mike Budenholzer. And his impact to this team, especially offensively, I know I have my worries about if he can turn Yusuf Nerkic into Brook Lopez 2.0, but I don't think it's insane for him to do something like that with Yusuf Nerkic or be able to turn this offense into what was at times so stale. And in the fourth quarter, just so much hero ball. I know Mike Budenholzer says he likes to play random, but clearly there's a game plan behind that. And in the fourth quarter is really where I need to see some real stability and real X's and O's. I mean, Brendon, how many times was it mano-a-mano, hero ball, and the big three had no idea who they were giving the ball to in the final closing seconds? Thank God players like Kevin Durant were injured or Bradley Beal were injured, because you know how much harder it would be if we didn't know who we were going to give the ball to in the final 2 minutes of the game, where oftentimes due to process of elimination, like in that Knicks game where Kevin Durant didn't play, they're like, all right, well, Kevin Durant isn't here, so we're definitely just giving it to Devin Booker. And the choice was kind of made for them. I'm really looking forward to Mike Budenholzer taking the team by the horns and fixing what was, a random offense, but in the worst way possible.
It's like lowercase r random to uppercase r random, where it actually has a philosophy behind it rather than an accident that leads you to make it random. Here's how I think I would sum up a lot of what you said, what the optimism I have about Bud. We'll go into some of the more granular stuff, I think. In the next segment, we'll play a little fact or fiction game. We'll kind of debate the narratives of a lot of the things that Bud has associated with him, because he's been around for damn near 25 years in the NBA at this point. We've known who this guy is. But big picture, when I think of this Suns team, he's going to make it easy. He's going to make it easier, hopefully, because Frank Vogel, I think, especially when you're talking about the structures of this team, whether that was even things like the rotation, who was playing, who had his trust, of course, down to on-court stuff like you mentioned with the offense and the late game execution. Frank Vogel didn't make it easy on this team. It was confusing as to what everybody's roles might be, who was going to be even in that rotation, what the plan was on the offensive end to win some of these close games, how the big three were going to play off of each other. And frankly, I'll go a step further, Ben. I feel like this big three sometimes makes it hard because of the fact that, yeah, they're not Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh in terms of fit, right? They're not Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett in terms of fit. They do have some things that they're undersized. Two of those guys play the same position. They like to take mid-range shots. None of them is a dominant, historically elite defender. Bud is going to be here to make everybody's lives a little bit easier. And I think the other big one, accountability. And we'll come back to this a little bit in the last segment. And I mentioned this yesterday as well on our show. He makes like double what Frank Vogel made. At a certain point, that is Matt Ishbia telling everybody in the building, this is our guy. He matters. Listen to him. We believe in him. He's not going anywhere. Make it work. And that will go a long way.
You know, you said something earlier that I kind of just put in the back of my head, but while you were kind of finishing up. Frank Vogel didn't make anything look easy. And it wasn't just the offensive side of the ball. Part of Frank Vogel was, and in hindsight, it's so stupid, but they were like, we're going to put all this firepower out there, and we know that they have defensive deficiencies. So we're going to go get a defensive coordinator to make it work. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You have two separate sides of the aisle. The Phoenix Suns offense and Frank Vogel that don't do anything the same. And so it wasn't symbiotic at all. So it was, lowercase L random, not just on the offensive end, on the defensive end. And then as well, this cannot be overstated. Last year, we were all calling for Frank Vogel's job. Fair or not, I was doing it live on the air. I said, yeah, Frank Vogel's got to be done. Along with other things that I'm not too proud of that I had said before. But Frank Vogel, you got to stand by that. You got to admit where it was done. Just admit you made a mistake and then move on to the next guy. Coach Budenholzer getting nearly double the amount of money. You had said, like, it's our guy. Doesn't matter what Suns fans tweet. It doesn't matter what Kevin Durant says. Because on the pecking order, yes, in skill and who matters more, Kevin Durant. But if they have to pick a side at the end of the year, they're not firing another head coach. I don't care how much money Matt Ishbia has. At some point, billionaires became rich by not giving away their money. And they're still paying Monty Williams, if I'm not mistaken. They're still paying Frank Vogel.
I don't know how that works because he took the Pistons job, but now he's fired again. Who gets to pay him now?
Obviously, nothing goes against the salary cap, but regardless, whatever. You pay Frank Vogel and Mike Budenholzer, and then hire another guy? And then what does that make you look like? If you continuously fire coaches, you are going to get worse head coaching hires because no coach wants the stability of a team like the Los Angeles Lakers, who got no one that they wanted because they know that they're going to get ran out the door the second LeBron says something or the second there's an uprising in the fan base. You can have one mulligan. That happens in all sorts of sports. We got the guy wrong. That's fine. Mike Budenholzer is getting 3 years minimum. He's getting 3 years. Even next year if it doesn't work out. They paid too much. They don't want to be seen as dysfunctional. Matt Ishbia doesn't want the brushstroke of impatient owner. He's here and he's going to be here for the long haul. I'm really happy you'd mention that. That is a huge talking point that I think sometimes we just skim over.
Yeah, it sets the tone of the season where that's not going to be the focal point of the negativity and the criticism, because it just can't be. It's like the players have to adjust. Maybe the GM needs to make a trade. But I mean, we talk about this a lot in the NFL, right? Because that is a league where coaches, almost always, their philosophy and their tone that they set is what rules over the organization, and everybody kind of needs to fit into that. I think we're going to have a little bit of that in the NBA with the Suns this season, like we see in other organizations, Miami, Golden State, whatever, San Antonio. Real quick, though, before we get to fact or fiction, on the topic of coaching, the other two things I had in terms of the ways I'm pretty positive Bud will make a big impact, the staff he brought in, I believe in much more, even though I couldn't tell you who most of the dudes are, frankly, because he has a coaching tree. The coach of the Hawks, the coach of the Grizzlies, at least right now, are both disciples of Mike Budenholzer from once upon a time. Lloyd Pierce, I believe he was an assistant in Detroit last year under Monty. I don't know where he ended up now. He used to coach the Hawks previously, also a disciple of Mike Budenholzer. This guy has real people that have proven when he brings them in, they make an impact. And I think he'll do that on the Suns. And player development. I think we can believe in certain players on this team taking a step forward, because that's something he's done everywhere. We wouldn't know who Damari Carroll is now if not for Mike Budenholzer. He was a random scrap heap wing, and he became a player who was an all-star who we know because of Bud. So, all right, let's get to fact or fiction. We're very optimistic that Bud will have a big impact, but let's get to the narratives. There's some negative ones we got to cover too, that obviously Bud did get fired from his last team, and he wasn't always everybody's favorite in Atlanta or Milwaukee, especially come playoff time. So let's see. Will he actually do the things, good and bad, that fans are expecting for this team? We'll get there coming up next. First, today's show is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little different for you right now through FanDuel until September 22nd. So about a week left. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. I personally want to watch Tom Brady. I want to watch the games he does for at least a little while just to get a feel for it. I know I'm a sports media nerd, but I'm sure there's a lot of you out there. And that game was actually, even though it was the Cowboys in week 2, that game was blacked out. So, hey, maybe it's just to check him out. Maybe you have a favorite team you're not able to see here. Put a little money on something. Cards, 3-point dogs at home next week. Maybe that one. Maybe something else in the world of football. Maybe you just want to throw a future like the D-backs or the Cardinals to win the conference or win the division, whatever you want to do. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Ben, let's keep it rolling here. You want to play some fact or fiction? You ready to go?
Let's keep it rolling indeed. I'm into some fact or fiction.
All right. The most obvious one, the thing that I think people were expecting immediately when they even heard Bud was a candidate here, given that it was such a deficiency for the Suns last season, shot selection. The first question that I have here is, will Bud actually overhaul the shot selection? Will he actually make this team take the right types of shots, especially from deep? And I have some numbers we can go through, but what's your first instinct?
Fact, but I'm not necessarily hoping he takes everything that the Suns players do, mostly a mid-range assassins. I hope he just adds on to what their identity is. You know, we'll get into that another day, what the Suns' identity is and everything, but it was clearly last year, we're just going to mid-range you to death. And I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. Now, this team needs to take more threes. And I believe Budenholzer is going to do that. I mean, what he did with Brook Lopez and yada, yada, yada over with the Milwaukee Bucks. I hope it's not a complete overhaul, but I do understand the overcorrection. And especially at first, yes, fact, he's going to completely overhaul everything, which is why I'm going to be the one that preaches patience at the beginning of the season when they're 10-8 to start the season, and they're just feeling things out. And I'm going to say patience, let them figure it out. But fact, for sure.
I like what you said about at first. I actually think we could see a situation where maybe the Suns are way skewed in the Morey ball direction early in the season, threes, layups, and free throws. And maybe it actually comes back down to some kind of equilibrium as the season goes along, as he loosens the reins and lets the stars do their thing. And I think that'll be for the best. And I mentioned we have some numbers. So just as a reminder for people, the Suns actually took a decent amount of threes last year where they, not a ton, but the other issue wasn't just threes. They didn't take very many shots at the rim. And we talked about this a little yesterday. You brought it up with Booker and Beal. So they need to be doing both of those a lot more. And one thing Bud did, and hey, it's helpful to have like maybe the freakiest athlete we've ever seen in the NBA and Giannis on your team to get to the rim more. But he flipped that for them right away. And back then they had Eric Bledsoe, and so he's a driver. As the team developed, hey, Chris Middleton got a lot better. Let's let him do his thing. Chris Middleton's a mid-range shooter. Bobby Portis, who they got over time and developed, he's more of a mid-range ISO scorer. So you see the numbers actually trending back toward a little bit more of that mid-range, less efficient, quote unquote, and less analytics driven. But I say fact too, Ben. I think it can't be worse than it was last year. They were 19th in three-point frequency, 25th in rim frequency. They at least have to get closer to the middle of the pack, if not better. All right. Will Bud guarantee they play faster? Fact or fiction? Is it a given? It's a lock that Bud is going to make this team a transition killer?
Fiction. I just don't see that from this team right away. I mean, you got older guys like Kevin. It's hard for me to see a team because you're going to start the game with use of Nerkic. It's hard for me to see a team that's going to be running up and down the floor, killing teams in fast break points with Mason Plumlee and with Yusuf Nurkic and an older Kevin Durant. I know Kevin Durant likes to play fast, and if there's anyone that loves basketball, it's Kevin Durant. But I also just think you don't want to overuse a guy like Kevin Durant running 60-minute wind sprints for an entirety of a game. And yeah, I mean, sure. I totally get that he would want to do that, especially with Jrue Holiday and Giannis Antetokounmpo, both guys who can run the floor very, very well. I just don't see that fitting this team. Do you?
I tend to lean more where you are. Maybe it falls somewhere in the middle, kind of like we were saying. It would be hard to play slower than they did last year, so it's almost like a trick question. But I think we might see a situation where it's just deployed selectively and it can have an impact when they want it to. And at least they'll have the mindset and the head on their shoulders to be able to say, hey, especially when Tyus Jones is on the court, we're running. We're going to be a faster team. But he hasn't always done that. I honestly look at that reputation Bud has, and I think that's a Giannis reputation.
That was a really good point you had made, because what I was going to say after was definitely not with the starting unit. I just don't anticipate it's going to happen as much. But if you can change a pace with your second unit, which is, when I say second unit, I mean a combination of guys from the first unit, most likely Bradley Beal and whoever it is, Devin Booker, and at times Kevin Durant. You're going to stagger those guys. It's another thing that I want Mike Budenholzer to do better when staggering those guys. But Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, and Bradley Beal and Tyson, those guys are all, outside of Royce O'Neal, who's not old, he's just older. I think those guys can run. And if that's your identity off the bench, like, hey, we're just going to tire teams out, or you're going to bring in a bulldog of a guy like Grayson Allen, I get that. It's just going to be hard to do with these older guys. Yes, they're going to play faster, but they're definitely not going to lead the league in fast break points, if that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah, one of the things Vogel tried so hard to get them to buy into last year was running off of makes, which is a thing that teams, the best transition teams do it. Sacramento, obviously being like the best. De'Aaron Fox will grab an inbounds pass off of a made layup and still be down the floor before the rest of the defense can be, or I guess a made three would be even more, because the defense should already be set
on the opposing defense.
Exactly. and less predictable, right? It's like, obviously you're going to run when you get a steal, but can you run when teams are not expecting it? Okay. Can Bud turn Nurk into his next Millsap, which is a guy we forget? We always just say Brook Lopez. Paul Millsap also started bombing threes when he started to be working with Mike Budenholzer. And of course, Brook Lopez does qualify here. Will that happen? Fact or fiction?
Paul Millsap, just really quickly, was one of those guys on those long list of Phoenix Suns players that never actually became Phoenix Suns. Eric Gordon was on that list for a little bit. Paul Millsap was in every Suns trade rumor for years. I'm going to say fiction. I think it's... Now, here's what I will say. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, but I think they're going to try. I think they are going to try to do it because that's what Coach Bud's philosophy's been. And when I look at Jusuf Nurkic, he does look slimmer. And if you're going to talk about running up and down the floor and shooting up more threes, being a finesse team, and especially with the Jusuf Nurkic thing, I definitely think they're going to try it, but I think that they're going to see that as a, let's go back to what Nurkic was doing before, because I don't think Nurkic was the problem with this team. And also, Paul Millsap, if I'm not mistaken, at one point was like $100 million a year player when not everyone is getting $100 million. He was still a very good player in the NBA. He led that Hawks team at one point. And that Denver
he made an all-star team in Utah before he even got to Atlanta. So better than Nurk, for sure.
And then Brook Lopez, I mean, he's a defensive player, the year caliber player. He wasn't a terrible shooter before he got to Bud. I just see those two guys, and you know how much I love Jusuf Nurkic and how much I'll defend that guy till the cows come home, basically, your favorite saying. But I just think those other two guys are just well equipped, more equipped for that type of role than Jusuf Nurkic is. What about you?
Yeah, I made the case a little bit for it yesterday. I don't buy it really happening, though. I think that I agree they'll try. Personally, here's how I would put it. If it happens, it'll be by the very end of the season or even into next season. This stuff doesn't flip in a day. People forget Brook Lopez really started that evolution when he was with the Lakers, and then he got to Milwaukee and took it to an even higher level. And
1000%.
I think that has a lot more to do with Brook than, frankly, Bud. And like you mentioned, Millsap, Nurk doesn't have shooting touch from anywhere at a high level. That's what holds me back, right? He's just not that type of player. He's a passer, a playmaker. He uses his physicality to get inside and just put up bunnies, and he's not even that efficient on those. He's not like somebody who's like a mid-range killer who's just going to extend his range a few feet. That's not really what it is. So I'm not super optimistic. But one thing I could see it happening from the corners, maybe. Maybe that's a step we see this year. You know, a few a game where he can put them up and actually make the defense close out, and he can space that way.
Do you hope it happens? Do you hope they not that obviously we all hope we get Brook Lopez and Paul Millsap. I'm saying, do you hope it happens because you believe it can, or just because you believe in Coach Budenholzer's attempt to try? Or would you rather Jusuf Nurkic just kind of stay in the role that he's already in?
I don't think it can happen to the level that it would need to really revolutionize the team, right? I mean, you would have to be talking about, to really be like, wow, he is a legitimate Miles Turner type of player for this group, where he's able to legitimately create space for the other stars on the team. He would have to be league average or better on that side of the floor, in that part of the game, making those threes. And I just don't see that happening. So even if it happens and it's 34%, I just don't think that really changes much, if I'm being honest. All right, last one quickly. I'll answer. Is Bud as bad of a playoff adjuster as people say? That was a reputation he had coming out of Milwaukee. That's part of why he got fired. Obviously lost in the first round to an 8 seed, the Miami Heat, who eventually made the finals in 2023. My take on this, nobody is as bad of a playoff adjuster as their fan base will tell you they are. I think that it's the coach that has less talent and draws the worst hand from a health standpoint or a luck standpoint in a series, we can always say they should have adjusted. Monty was bad at playoff adjustments, and then he was up 2-0 in the NBA Finals, right? Then he was a bad playoff adjuster because Giannis scored 50 in a game 6. It's like he lost because Giannis is better than anybody on the Suns. That's why I don't buy that really that much anyway. I think the Suns will be make or break by their talent, their structure, their chemistry, their buy-in, much more than if Bud calls a timeout at the right point or puts the right small forward on the court for 3 minutes in the second quarter.
No one is as bad of a playoff adjustment because here's why. Monty Williams didn't adjust. When he did in that Nuggets series. But when he did, it was too late. And his adjustments as well, just to give him a little bit of a break, was guys that I can't even remember who was coming out. The guy from Terrence Ross was coming off the bench.
Yeah.
There was another player that had to come in later on. He was older. I can't even remember who it was.
TJ Warren was in there. Landry Shamet
TJ Warren. That's who it was. Well, Landry Shamet drove all of us insane. That still to this day was insanity that he still got as much playing time as he did. But it was the TJ Warrens. It was the Terrence Rosses of the world. But in that final series, he didn't adjust. Now you can call it the Dario Saric effect. Frank Vogel, here's what I will. He does try to adjust. He does. In that Lakers-Suns series where the Suns came back and beat them, he was throwing out Brook Lopez. He was throwing out players in that final game, just trying to stretch the floor a little bit. He tries, but I'm never going to say someone who won an NBA championship is a bad playoff adjuster. Giannis Antetokounmpo was injured in that series against the Miami Heat, and Jimmy Butler was just on an all-time tear. Jrue Holiday eats every 6-7 and guys under lunch. He's Devin Booker's worst nightmare. And Jrue Holiday was getting father-sonned by Jimmy Butler in that series. So I don't hold that against him. It was just an insane Linsanity type run with the Heat. I'm not going to sit here and say Budenholzer's a good playoff adjuster, but I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really think this matters as much unless you have Spoelstra, Kerr, Popovich. I'm sure I'm missing someone.
Ty Lue.
Ty Lue. Ty Lue's a great adjuster, but like, people are going to get upset about it at the end of the year. I promise you. And if we don't have one of those guys, it's just kind of an even Steven type of thing, whoever you go up against. But if you go up against Spoelstra, yeah, you're going to get schooled. You better hope you have the better players. But even still, whatever. It's only so much you can do.
It's an easy thing to glom onto. We're on the same page. All right, quick segment to wrap things up. How much of a difference will it make to have the players actually see Bud as a major voice in this organization? Because Vogel was not that, to say the least. And by the time the season was over, we had numerous stories about how much of a problem that became. What will that mean? Coming up next. First, today's show is brought to you by the Gametime app, the best place to buy a ticket. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste your time. I can tell you, whether it's concerts, comedy, theater, or sports, you go in, it knows where you are, of course, so it shows you. Here's what's coming up in Phoenix or wherever you are. Here's the best events, the most popular events that we have the best deals for. Click here. Okay, I'm in there. When I get into, let's say, D-backs Padres coming up in about 10 days, it'll show me the best, cheapest values for that event right at the top. You click it. You can see all-in pricing, everything you're going to owe, the view from your seat for that purchase, and more right there. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Ben, as everybody loves to hear me say, let's close out the show. How much of a difference will this make? Because let me just refresh the people's memories here, okay? We heard via The Athletic, right as the buzzer sounded on the final game of this team's season, that players were laughing at this coach. In Game 4 of the sweep by the Wolves, we saw Bradley Beal completely, shirk. To be respectful, we'll say blow off Frank Vogel and, kind of have to backtrack in his media availability the next day. There were plenty of disagreements. And I personally think a lot of that came from Vogel not truly having the support or being the top option of this organization from the moment he was hired. That's not giving him some kind of protection. I thought he should have been fired, but I think it set everybody up for failure. And this year will be a lot different.
It was so clear after the Phoenix Suns lost to the Clippers in ridiculous fashion. I think they lost by like 40 points in that game. I remember cutting up audio here at iHeart, and I was listening to this. I was like, I don't take you seriously, man. You sound like a disappointed father, not someone that's about ready to go in there and open a can of you-know-what on the players. And so that's article...
a great comp, by the way. It's like when a family member gets in a clear argument with their spouse or their child or their parent, and then they come back from the other room where you heard them yelling and they go, "Oh no, everything's fine, guys. Don't worry." It's one, you should be mad at them. And two, we heard you being mad at them. Own it. This is real. This is a big deal. You gotta bring some fire here, dude. And he just flat out lied to the fans and the media in that moment.
Yeah, and I don't know. Just really quickly on that Athletic article, that was so weak by the players. I don't know who leaked it, and I'm not going to blame anyone in particular. That was so weak.
It might have rhymed with Schmerick Schmorden would be my number one guess. If
people speculated on Isaiah Thomas. I don't really buy that, especially for a guy that's trying to get another chance at a team. I saw that speculated out there. Eric Gordon potentially. I don't want to point it at anyone because we don't have a source for it. And I don't think it was Kevin Durant because he hates the media, which I don't blame the guy. That was so bleeping weak. It was so weak. I remember as soon as that game turned off, the Shams Charania post came up my phone. I looked at it. Me and my buddies were just laughing. This is so... Take your loss like a man. If the Suns lose again in any playoff format, and we see an article like that, I'm not blaming Coach Bud. At some point, look in the mirror. I understand that some relationships just aren't symbiotic, they just don't work out. That's fine. I got no problem with that. You got the guy out the door, but at some point, players, you need to look in the mirror. And I'm not again pointing at anyone in particular. But they got the guy out the door. The big bad mean man is gone. They got someone else who seems, by the way, like a personality that would be really easy to get along with. I'm not going to blame the coach this year. I'm going to seriously blame the players. So if I see an article like that again, man, I will fire and brimstone.
Here's the thing. I think I kind of felt that even like you're saying last year, right? It's just, it comes back to the point here, which is that management, whether you put that on Ishbia, James Jones, or the combination of all of them, created a permission structure for the players to make Vogel the enemy, make him the fall guy, right? That's not going to be there this year. An article like that would probably not even happen because nobody would sit there and think, if I leak this, the blame is off me. He looks bad. He'll get fired. Everybody in the locker room will look better. I just don't even think that's going to be in anybody's minds because, one, the money, the buy-in, all that. Mike Budenholzer also, we got to just say, like, he has accomplished significantly more than almost any coach in the NBA when you include his time with the Spurs. He has, I believe, 4 rings. I don't think he was there for the first one, but he was there for the second 3 or the following 3. And then in Milwaukee, he beat both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on his way to that championship in 2021. He's been around forever. Everybody knows him. Everybody respects him. So I just think it's like, figure it out. That's going to be the message, I would think, from somebody like Matt Ishbia or James Jones. Make it work.
This doesn't just fall on the players. And just so I get my answer out there very clearly, will there be more accountability? There better bleeping be. I mean, I seriously, the players, I don't care if they hate this guy. Act like you like him. I work with people all the time that I can't stand, some of which I could throw a stone and hit them right now.
I think I see one, right? I'm just kidding.
I actually don't know that guy. But either way, people have the same way about me. But guess what? I get along, and I don't have any enemies. And you need to figure it out. And it's not just the players. Matt Ishbia and we mentioned this in the last episode, had that press conference and basically dodged every question that was of note and said, I don't know, ask James. And then brought James in and threw James under the bus. And then we all wanted James gone. It was like, okay, everyone from top to bottom, there needs to be way more leadership, way more accountability from head coach to owner to GM. And that's kind of where I see it.
Absolutely. Great conversation on Bud. I wanted to have this one. I knew we were going to do it the minute we started our season preview. Hope you enjoyed. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We'll get more questions, 2 more answered this week, 5 more the week after that, 3 more the week after that, and then we'll be on our way to Media Day, preseason, and beyond. Enjoy your Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.